Hello, listeners. Welcome to Stars of the Golden Age, a show that highlights the lives of legends from film, music, and the birth of television during Hollywood's Golden Age, with a special emphasis on their lives behind the scenes. I am your host, Erin Carlson. Today's episode will be a little different because we are not talking about just one person or even two people. Today, I will tell you the stories of 3 different people. This comes from a request from one of my beloved Patreon supporters, Matt. He loves old television shows, who doesn't? One of them being Three's Company, which was his mom's favorite show. So when I asked Matt if he had any requests, he suggested that I cover Norman Fell, Audra Lindley, or Don Knotts, otherwise known as Mr. and Mrs. Roper and Mr. Furley from Three's Company. I was happy to oblige, but I quickly realized it wouldn't be as easy to gather information as I typically find. On 2 of them, at least. I did find a very short biography book on Norman Fell's life, but it basically just repeated vague basic information over and over for only about 75 pages. And there isn't a book at all on Audra Lindley's life. Don Knotts, though, I can tell you all about him. His daughter Karen wrote a book about his life, so I read it. Today, I want to shine a light on all of their legacies. These 3 wacky Santa Monica landlords. So I'm going to give you what I'm able to, and the 3 of them can share the spotlight here with us today. I'll get started in just a second, but first a big Golden Age thank you to Alex K. for becoming a new Patreon supporter. If you want to learn more about how to support the show, and in return gain access to a whole ton of bonus content, I'll tell you how at the end of this show. Thank you so much, Alex. Today, we will be talking about Norman Fell, Audra Lindley, and Don Knotts. This one's for you, Matt. First, let's talk about Mr. Roper and that iconic smirky side eye, portrayed so perfectly by Mr. Norman Fell. Norman Fell was born on March 24th, 1924, in Philadelphia, to parents Samuel and Esther Feld. Yes, Feld with a D. Samuel Feld was an Austrian Jewish immigrant who worked as a tailor once he was settled in the U.S. Esther was Jewish as well. Her parents had immigrated from Russia. The family lived in a working-class neighborhood in Philadelphia, and it was clear from the moment Norman could walk and talk that he was a natural performer. Despite growing up through the hardships of the Great Depression, Norman's parents were his biggest cheerleaders when it came to his desire to entertain and make others laugh. It was actually a much welcome treat during those difficult times. He was the kid who was always entertaining everyone around him. He loved to get a laugh any chance he could. Once he entered high school, he was able to join the drama club and participate in high school theater productions, branching out into community theater productions as a teenager as well. Besides that, there isn't much more I can tell you about Norman's childhood. After graduating from Central High School in Philadelphia, Norman really wanted to enter the world of the performing arts. But he graduated from high school just months after the U.S. entered World War II, so any dreams he had would have to wait. Well, kind of. While serving his country during the Second World War, Norman was able to nurture his dreams a little bit after all, as he took part in a variety of theatrical productions for his fellow troops, aiming at boosting morale. After devoting his time to the war, as a tail gunner in a B-25 bomber, I should say, he returned home to his freedom to fully pursue his dreams of acting. He enrolled in the drama program at Temple University in his hometown of Philadelphia. Norman Fell was noticed in his college theater productions, and that quickly led to parts in larger community productions. Knowing he wanted to really hone in his skills on the stage and hopefully make a career out of his passion, Norman knew he had to go to New York City. So that's where he headed, where he secured parts in off-Broadway productions and eventually landed in the esteemed Actors Studio. He worked hard during his years in New York for several years. Norman's big breakthrough role came in 1955 when he was hired for the Broadway production of The Desk Set. He was 31 years old. His performances were always very well received. He had the perfect combination of drive, energy, and charisma to make him a beloved presence on the stage. In his years of working in the theater in New York, Norman Fell married his wife Dolores sometime in the early 1950s. The biography said 1953, and elsewhere said 1950. The vague biography also said that they remained married until her death. Elsewhere, I read that they divorced after 4 years, and he was married and divorced 2 more times. He had 2 daughters with his second wife, and he and his third wife adopted a son together. Norman Fell was a private man. It was very important to him to maintain a typical life outside of the Hollywood and New York demands and the excitement of living in those worlds. He was described as grounded, generous, and very kind. He wasn't your typical celebrity. He always maintained that blue-collar Philadelphia way of life, even when he was surrounded by the glitz, glamour, and drama of Hollywood and New York. Regarding Norman Fell's career, we all know him from his most famous role, Mr. Stanley Roper from Three's Company. He and Mrs. Roper, Audra Lindley, played the building's landlords, the Ropers, for the first 3 seasons of Three's Company, from 1977 through 1979. Don Knotts, who we'll get into in a little bit, wrote out the remainder of the series as the building's landlord. TV hadn't seen the last of the Ropers, though. Norman Fell and Audra Lindley moved on to their own series, a spin-off of Three's Company, called The Ropers. This was actually the network's idea, not any kind of contract dispute or hostile work environment or anything like that. The network wanted to capitalize on the success of Three's Company, and the Ropers in particular, by giving them their own show. It was all about money. Audra Lindley was all for it. Norman Fell, not so much. He was reluctant to leave an already successful show to start a very risky new venture. And it turned out that he was validated in those reservations. The Ropers only lasted for 2 seasons. For their first season, it aired on Tuesday nights, right after Three's Company, and that was great. For the second season, the network moved them to Saturday night at 8 o'clock. Chips was playing in the same time slot over on NBC, so they had great competition. They did very well in that first season, but took a huge dive after the lineup change. Norman Fell approached ABC about his or their return to Three's Company, but the network wasn't interested in the storyline or cost that would be involved in inviting the Ropers back into the mix. And they sure weren't willing to give Don Knotts the boot. Norman Fell and Audra Lindley did return to Three's Company one last time in March of 1981. And then the Ropers went into television legend history. Well, almost. Norman Fell is credited with having played Mr. Roper on Ellen's sitcom in 1997. I'm sure I saw it because I think I watched every episode of that show in the 90s, and probably again in reruns. But my mind did not hang on to that moment in television. Norman Fell had a diverse acting career, playing a multitude of characters and genres. But when the world fell in love with him as Stanley Roper on Three's Company, he found himself typecast. He was now Mr. Roper, and it was difficult for him to settle back into more dramatic or serious roles. When asked in an interview after the success of Three's Company and the Ropers what kind of role he preferred to play, dramatic or comedic, this was his reply. Quote, I love the dazzling with my footwork. I don't like anyone to categorize me if I can possibly avoid it. So when something comes up that's a little different than we've done, I jump at it. I don't have a favorite. It depends on the role. It depends on the writing. If it's a real dramatic show, a real good part where there are many dimensions and colors to the character, then it's fun, be it comedic or dramatic." End quote. Although he left the role of Stanley Roper feeling typecast in that part, he reflected that it had been his favorite part that he played on television. He loved Mr. Roper's instigating personality and thought it was incredibly fun to play. Norman Fell passed away from cancer on December 14th, 1998, at the age of 74. Let's talk about Mr. Roper's eccentrically beautiful other half, Mrs. Roper, portrayed by the stunning Audra Lindley. Audra Lindley was born on September 24, 1918, in Los Angeles. I wish I had more information about her childhood or who she was as a person, but I really wasn't able to find any information. What I can tell you is that Audra began her professional life in show business young, starting from the bottom and trying to work her way up. Both of her parents had been in show business, so it was in her blood. She worked her way up to Hollywood films, and in 1941, at the age of 22, she was cast in a bit part as an uncredited nurse in the Marlene Dietrich and Edward G. Robinson drama, Manpower. This was followed by a few other bit parts in movies during the early 1940s, but her big break just wasn't coming. Then, in the summer of 1942, when she was 23 years old, she tried her hand on the other side of the U.S. when she landed on Broadway in a production of Comes the Revelation, which played at Jolson's 59th Street Theater for just 2 performances. Her acting career was quickly put to rest when she fell in love and married Aaron Hardy Alm in 1943. She was much too busy to have a Broadway career for the next few years because she and Alm had 5 children. So Audra was very busy raising her children and taking care of her large family. She still held that passion for acting close to her heart though, and she just couldn't completely put her desire to act to rest while her children grew. Audra was able to step away from her duties at home from time to participate in the new form of entertainment of television. Quite a bit, actually. Returning to the limelight in 1950, she appeared in a few episodes of Lux Video Theater, as well as Shadow of the Cloak, The Clock, Lights Out, the Philco Television Playhouse, Kraft Television Theater, Goodyear Television Playhouse, Playhouse 90, and many more guest appearances on television throughout the 1950s. In 1958, she landed a lead role in the daytime soap From These Roots, which aired for a total of 912 episodes from 1958 to 1961. In 1962, she joined the cast of the soap opera Search for Tomorrow, and in 1964, she moved over to the soap Another World, where she played Liz Matthews for 5 years. Audra Lindley stayed busy in her television work throughout the 1970s, mostly appearing in one-episode guest spots on shows. She appeared in hit shows like Maude, Chico and the Man, Barnaby Jones, and, of course, The Love Boat. I love The Love Boat. Then, everything changed in 1976 when Audra Lindley was cast in the role of the lovable Helen Roper in the new television sitcom titled Three's Company. And while doing so, she gave to the world one of the most iconic characters in television history. As perfectly described by NPR's Neda Ulaby. Quote, "Helen Roper was a loopy landlady, forever interfering with her tenants, bickering with her husband, and pursuing crafts such as macrame and flower arranging." End quote. The character of Mrs. Roper set forth a cultural phenomenon that still lives strong to this day. And it was only possible with Audra Lindley's perfectly unique portrayal of the bright, quirky, ditzy, and beautiful Helen Roper. Helen Roper was a fashion force. Her bright, colorful caftans, her bright orange curls, which was a wig, by the way, her big sunglasses, and her big, bold statement jewelry. She was often too much for her husband Stanley, but we all knew that he loved her to pieces and would be lost without her vibrant presence in his world. To this day, streets are filled with hundreds of Mrs. Ropers at Mrs. Roper romps that occur all over the United States. The Mrs. Roper romps originated in New Orleans in 2013 by the local LGBT community as a parade known as Southern Decadence. From there, it went to San Diego, and then all over the U.S. and beyond. People are inspired by Helen Roper's dynamic personality, her ability to live her life her own way, and her willingness to be comfortable in her own skin, and her own vibrant caftans, regardless of what everyone else may be doing or saying or wearing. Helen Roper was fun, unique, creatively presented, strong, unconventional, and full of warm sauciness. And through the Mrs. Roper romps, her legacy will continue to live on. As for the woman behind Helen Roper, Audra Lindley, she stayed very busy in television work after her time as Mrs. Roper came to an end. A couple of her last television appearances were in 1995 as Phoebe's grandmother on Friends, and a recurring part on Sybil as Sybil Shepherd's mother. Her last appearance in that role aired in October of 1997, 10 days before her death. Audra had remained married to her husband Aaron Hardy Ulm, the father of her 5 children, until his death in 1970. He died of a massive heart attack while on vacation in Daytona Beach at just 57 years old. In 1972, she found love again and married actor James Whitmore. They were married for 7 years, divorcing in 1979. Audra Lindley died on October 16, 1997, of complications from leukemia. She was 79 years old. After the Ropers were swooned away from their comfortable home in Santa Monica with Three's Company, their building was sold and management was handed over to the new owner's quirky and flamboyant brother, Ralph Furley. If viewers were sad to see Mrs. Roper's loud and colorful fashion sense leave the building, they had to look no further than the building's new landlord, Mr. Furley, self-proclaimed Bachelor at Large, played by Don Knotts, who, up to this point, the world knew best from his role as Barney Fife on The Andy Griffith Show. I had access to a lot more information on Don Knotts' life than I did Norman Fell and Audra Lindley. For his life, I read his daughter's book, Tied Up in Knots, My Dad and Me by Karen Knotts. She wrote a very candid recounting of her father's life, and I'm happy to share some of it with you today. So, let's jump in. I'll tell you all about it. Don Knotts was born as Jesse Donald Knotts on July 21, 1924, in Morgantown, West Virginia, to parents Jesse and Elsie Knotts. He was the youngest of 4 children in the Knotts family, all boys. The family had had a farm, but illness for Jesse and the Great Depression led to them losing the farm. Then they bought a large home in Morgantown and opened it up to boarders. In order to keep as many rooms in the home open to boarders, the family itself had very tight conditions for their own sleeping arrangements. But they needed the money. Morgantown, West Virginia was your typical picture-perfect small-town USA. A place of trust and friendship and strong values. A real-life Mayberry. Life wasn't always picture-perfect during Don's childhood, though. His father, Jesse, suffered from severe mental illness. The story goes that he was a typical hardworking man one day, working on the family's farm, and he had an episode out on the field one day that made him pass out and temporarily go blind. And he was never the same afterwards. Elsie and the boys cared for Jesse at home as long as they could, but it finally came to the point where it was just too much for them to handle. There were too many incidents where Jesse's paranoia and mood swings became very dangerous to Elsie and the boys. Sometime between 1936 and 1938, when Don would have been around 12 to 14 years old, Elsie had to commit her husband to an asylum. On top of the difficulties with his father, 2 of Don's older brothers were heavy drinkers once they were a little older, yet still living at home, and they would often cause disruptions in the home. One major distraction from these anxieties at home was radio, and another was entertaining, escaping reality into the wide world of imagination. Don started with what he had, socks. He would gather socks from the laundry and put on sock puppet shows. Then he spotted a little Charlie McCarthy dummy in a shop window, a ventriloquist dummy, and he really wanted that dummy. The family was very poor, though. There simply wasn't money for luxuries, even small ones. Don worked hard to save his coins so he could buy that dummy. Then, one day, his mother put some change in his hand and told him to go down to the grocery store and pick up a half a pound of ground beef, which, by the way, was intended to feed the family of 6 for dinner. A half a pound of beef. When Elsie saw how desperately her youngest son wanted that dummy in the store window, she caved. "Make that a quarter pound of beef," she said. She made the sacrifice for her already hungry family so her youngest child could be happy. She knew that dummy may contribute to the path of his future. Don Knotts became quite the ventriloquist and was soon performing all over the streets of Morgantown for spare change. He'd gotten really good at throwing his voice, and he loved to use that talent to surprise people wherever he could. When he entered high school, he was beloved by all. He was voted class president 3 out of 4 years of his high school career, and he wrote a gossip column in the school newspaper. The column was called Dots and Dashes by Knotts. In his senior year of high school, Don Knotts was voted wittiest, the best all-around senior boy, most pleasing personality, and most popular student in his class. Don also teamed up with 2 buddies during high school, and together they formed the group The Radio 3. They sang, played music, piano, banjo, and mandolin, and Don was there with his trusted dummy making people laugh. And, of course, Don Knotts acted in plays with the drama club. Don could play dramatic parts, but most of the time he was just plain funny. He could walk into a classroom at school and make the room erupt in laughter without even saying a word, even the teachers. He let his eyes and body gestures do the talking, and that talk was really funny. Don's sense of humor and desire for laughter may have partially been sought out as therapy, part of his emotional toolbox. Because by the time he graduated from high school in 1942, Don Knotts had already lost not only his father, but one of his older brothers. How did Don Knotts first know he wanted to be an actor? Well, he knew the second he first saw Laurel and Hardy on the big screen at the local Warner Theater. Many theaters still had live entertainment before their feature film would play, and Don Knotts got in on that action by getting up on stage any and all opportunities he had on open mic nights. Don's dreams of being an actor had grown big, so as soon as he finished high school, he made the leap from Morgantown, West Virginia to New York City. He and a friend chased their big dreams as fast as that Greyhound bus could go. They found lodging at the YMCA and got jobs while they worked their way into the world of New York City show business. Don's job was as a hotel elevator operator. They quickly learned, however, that it wasn't as easy as the images in their dreams. Don had no choice but to return to Morgantown and get a job in his hometown. The job was plucking chickens at the local grocery store. The New York experience wasn't a worthless venture. Don and his friend gained valuable life experience, they learned a lesson or two, and Don got to meet Mr. Ray Bolger. Don would have to figure out his life's journey later after his big New York defeat, because the United States was by that time heavily involved in World War II. Feeling an increasing pressure to enlist, Don Knotts did just that in 1943 when he was 19 years old. Under profession on his U.S. Army application, Don wrote ventriloquist, and at the recruiting office, he had the recruiters in tears as he showed off some of his talents. Doing so ended up being a really good thing for Don, because when it was time to be assigned military duty after basic training, he was assigned to Special Services, entertainment. He was still put in extremely dangerous situations, but he wasn't in combat. Don was quickly quite famous among the troops and beloved by everyone. He entertained the troops to boost morale, he entertained wounded soldiers in military hospitals, and he entertained released prisoners of war. Those men had been through unimaginable trauma, and not one laughed. They didn't have laughter in them anymore, not for a long time. But Don was happy to try. Don Knotts had finally made it into show business. And while doing so, he earned himself a World War II Victory Medal, an Asiatic Pacific Campaign Medal, an Honorable Service lapel button, and a marksmanship badge. After the war and his discharge from the U.S. Army in 1946, 22-year-old Don Knotts attended the University of West Virginia in education on the GI Bill. He still wasn't sure what his future held, but he really hoped it was show business. His mother wanted him to have a backup plan. She believed in her youngest son, but she wanted him to attend college, just in case. There, he continued to entertain in any capacity he could. And he also fell in love. He met a fellow UWV student named Kay Metz, and they were married in December of 1947, when Don was a college senior and Kay a junior. 5 months later, Don Knotts became a college graduate. They decided Kay would leave school at that point, and the newlyweds would head to New York, so Don could try his luck at show business once again. He had a lot more experience and a lot more confidence than he had had just out of high school. It wasn't easy at first, struggling to make it in the big city, but that luck slowly began to show its face. First, on the radio, which led to connections in the business, including to Mr. Television himself, Milton Berle. Another future comic icon was in the mix too, Jerry Stiller. From radio, Don Knotts worked his way into live television, and once he was in there, he was quickly a very busy working man. From his steady, decent paychecks coming in from working on 2 television shows simultaneously, Don and Kay were able to afford a home of their own in Dumont, New Jersey. In 1954, they welcomed their first child, Karen. And 3 years later, in February of 1957, they completed their family with a son, Thomas. Karen recalled those early years in New Jersey as happy and idyllic. One memory she shared in her book was the way her father was known to mow the lawn. In Bermuda shorts. Don Knotts was the first man in their neighborhood in Dumont, New Jersey, to be so bold as to wear shorts. Entertainment work can be really good for stretches. And then, just like that, it can be really scary. Work can end with little to no warning. When that happened to Don Knotts early in his television career, a show business buddy told him about a Broadway play that was auditioning for Southern men. A play about the Army called No Time for Sergeants. And the lead role had been cast with an actor named Andy Griffith. Don got the part in that play, And the connection he made with the lead actor would become very beneficial a couple years down the road. By 1960, both Andy Griffith and Don Knotts had relocated to Los Angeles. Don with The Steve Allen Show, and Andy Griffith was in the beginning stages of a pilot for a new television sitcom. When Don Knotts saw his Broadway co-star's sitcom pilot, The Andy Griffith Show, he wanted in. So he called up Andy Griffith and suggested that the sheriff of Mayberry needed a deputy. It wasn't up to Andy, though. It was up to the show's executive producer, the great Sheldon Leonard. Don was in, and the character of Barney Fife was created for one episode based on Don Knotts' vision for him. And we all know how that one episode turned out. It turned into a contract and 161 more episodes. Andy Griffith had said at the beginning of the show in 1960 that he only wanted the show to run for 5 seasons. He didn't want it to drag on for too long. So, during season 5, Don Knotts naturally began looking for work. He got it, a multi-picture movie contract with Universal. But before the ink was even dry on that contract, Andy told Don he had decided to keep the Andy Griffith Show going. Don had a lot of flexibility in his new contract with Universal, so he could have stayed on with the show. But he decided it was time to move on to other projects, see what else there was out there. But he did return to Mayberry as a guest star. During Don's time as Barney Fife on The Andy Griffith Show, his marriage to Kay came to an end. Don was a loyal husband, according to his daughter Karen. But in 1964, he had fallen in love with another woman, and he wanted to pursue a relationship with her. The marriage was over after 16 years. Don would go on to be married 2 more times after Kay. He hated being alone. He always wanted a partner by his side. One entertaining thing daughter Karen had to say about her father's romantic partners was this, quote, "He paid for his girlfriend's nose, ear, and boob jobs, but he would only pay for 1 per girlfriend." End quote. Let's jump to Three's Company. When the Ropers were pushed out of their Santa Monica apartment building and shipped off to their new spin-off show, the show still needed a landlord for their storylines. It was a big part of the show's dynamic. Similar to B. Arthur in the Golden Girls casting process, someone suggested they get a Don Knotts type to fill the void in Three's Company. To which the casting director said, "Don Knotts type? Why don't we just get Don Knotts?" And so they did. Don Knotts joined the cast of Three's Company in the zany character of Mr. Furley. Many people did not think the character dynamic between tenants and landlord could be replaced with the Ropers gone. But they were proved wrong the second Don Knotts walked onto their screens. We were introduced to him in the Regal Beagle, where he ordered a 12-year-old Scotch, which he held up to his ear instead of his nose, to see if he could hear bagpipes. Then he asked for that really good Scotch to be mixed with root beer, and topped with whipped cream and a cherry on top. So viewers got a taste of what kind of guy Mr. Furley was right off the bat. The cast had been devastated to see Norman Fell and Audra Lindley go, but they fell instantly in love with Don Knotts. Everyone on set loved him. Don Knotts stayed with Three's Company until the series ended in 1984. Don Knotts was 60 years old when Three's Company came to an end, but he wasn't ready to hang up his showbiz hat quite yet, not even close. He joined a sitcom called What a Country in 1986, and that same year, the crew from Mayberry returned to the screen for the TV movie Return to Mayberry. He did a couple of episodes of Love Boat, of course. I mean, who didn't? Andy Griffith lured him onto Matlock as a recurring character in the late 80s, early 90s. And then he found a new avenue, voice work. He provided his voice for movies and shows like Scooby-Doo, Hermie, Johnny Bravo, Robot Chicken, Chicken Little, and Air Buddies. And he also returned to the stage. Unfortunately, he was also battling muscular degeneration, and his eyesight was rapidly worsening. He also developed lung issues and had to use an oxygen tank. But still, he kept doing voiceover work. By 2005, his health had really deteriorated. When he was in his last days, he was still hilariously funny. He was drifting away from this world, but he still managed to make everyone around him laugh. He knew he was dying, but he kept a bright spirit. At the very end, his daughter Karen asked him how he was feeling. He told her he was just waiting for the wizard to take him away. Don Knotts passed away the evening of February 26, 2006, at the age of 81. His daughter Karen said this of him, quote, "My father was, and shall remain, the greatest enigma of my life. He was known for playing characters who were simple, yet he was incredibly complex." End quote. Don Knotts was really nothing like Barney Fife or Ralph Furley. He was often quiet and shy in his private life, but Karen said there were also many times when the personalities of her father and Barney Fife would collide. And now, a few other interesting things I learned during my research. Bullet point number 1. In the mid-60s, after his divorce and his tenure on The Andy Griffith Show, Don Knotts bought a home in Beverly Hills. Not just any house, Barbara Stanwyck's former home. Don Knotts had the house heavily decorated in his favorite color, baby blue. Bullet point number 2. Ron Howard, who of course played Little Opie on The Andy Griffith Show, has allegedly said that he discovered he and Don Knotts are distant cousins. Bullet point number 3. There was a decades-long belief that Norman Fell and Jack Klugman had a bitter feud. They finally revealed after 40 years that they were actually friends. It was all just a hoax started from a rumor, and they just went with it. Bullet point number 4. Sadly, 2 of Audra Lindley's 5 children passed away before she did. One son in 1990 and another in 1994. In conclusion, I wish I had more to tell you about the Ropers, Norman Fell and Audra Lindley. You know how much I love to dig into our stars' early lives because it gives us such a good idea of how certain aspects of their later lives played out. Their personalities, decisions, and their relationships. I took what I could get with those 2, and I'm happy to have learned what I could about their lives. I'm even happier that they were chosen to play the Ropers. And I absolutely love that the character of Mrs. Roper lives on to this day through Roper romps throughout the US and Canada. I kind of want to go to one. We are blessed with more information about Don Knotts, a man who seemed born to entertain others and loved to make people laugh, which he did until his dying day. He had a serious and reserved side, but when he was on, and he was funny. I think it's safe to say that his comedic side was absolutely an emotional tool he used to overcome life's hardships, his own emotional hardships. And that comedy graced us with a couple of iconic sitcom characters that will be remembered for generations. Thank you, Don Knotts, Norman Fell, and Audra Lindley, for being the wonderful entertainers you all were. And thank you, Matt, for recommending them all for the show. Thank you all for listening. Please consider supporting this little independent podcast over on Patreon. And if you do, you will get a lot of great bonus content. Alex just did it, and so should you. It is a lot of work turning out these stories all on my own without a big fancy production team. And every dollar helps to keep the momentum going while I juggle this podcast with a full-time job. I would appreciate your support so much, and I promise it'll be worth it for you. You can learn more at patreon.com/Stars of the Golden Age podcast. There's a link in the show notes that will bring you right there. You not only get all future bonus content, but all of the bonus content I have shared already to date. And if you don't want to support this podcast, I forgive you, but please consider supporting one of your other favorite independent podcasters. There are a lot of great ones out there, those of us sharing these passion projects without a network or team behind the scenes, while working an actual paying full-time job too. Just something to consider. Keep the independent creator voices alive. Thanks, guys. Reach for the positive in every day, be kind to everyone you encounter, and have a great rest of your week. For this episode, I used the book Behind the Laughter, The True Story of Norman Fell by Oscar Starr. I also used an interview with Norman Fell with the U.S. American Forces Network from sometime in the early 1980s. A segment from NPR's Morning Edition with Neda Ulaby from September 18th, 2024. Playbill.com, IMDB, Britannica.com, and Wikipedia.